Welcome to another episode of the Mentorship Champion podcast, brought to you by Mentor Collective. We are a community of believers in the transformative power of relationships, and we're committed to connecting people to networks for innovation and success. In each episode, we dive deep into conversations with change makers who are driving student success through mentorship. We bring you stories of innovation, of resilience, and connection, all aimed at inspiring you to be a mentorship champion in your own right. So today, I am thrilled to host a distinguished guest who embodies the essence of mentorship in higher education, Donald Audi. As the VP for Equity and Community, the University Diversity and Inclusion Officer at Lehigh University, Donald has made tremendous strides in fostering an inclusive educational environment where diversity is celebrated and mentorship thrives. His expertise and accomplishments have not only transformed Lehigh University, but y'all also reshaped the landscape of higher education. This episode promises to leave you inspired, really, and informed and eager to learn from a respected mentor and leader. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and welcome to the Mentorship Champion podcast. To kick us off, is simply, literally, what does mentorship mean to you?
All right, that's the first question.
That's the first question.
All right. So I'll tell you, when I think about mentorship, I think about it from three different perspectives. There's that formal versus informal mentorship. There's that professional versus psychosocial mentorship, and then there's that I guess more sponsorship versus mentorship. So going beyond the mentorship and looking at moving into sponsorship. So when I think about that formal versus informal, when I think about mentorship, I think about those formal structures that exist, usually within organizational structures. And it might be within workplace, or it might be within a professional organization or something that exists there for you to be linked up to a potential mentor. Those serve a really good purpose to get you connected to the professional community of practice that you may be working in. And I find those connections to be very important. That at least I should say the structure to be very important, because it provides a structure for someone that doesn't know how to find a mentor, to access that particular structure, to identify a potential mentor. Then the other part of this is the informal part of it. While informal mentorship, I think about from the perspective, it's those are things that they last. I mean, formal mentorship, it lasts on kind of in the short term. But then it either transitions into this informal, or you connect it to this informal mentor. And that really is somebody who does serve to be that person that advises you, that person that guides you, that person that provides clarity and helps you set goals and helps you develop knowledge skills. You know, all of these different things that I expect from mentorship when I'm thinking about it. Then the other part of this is that professional versus psychosocial mentor. So those individuals that help you with professional development, those people that are going to help you establish goals, those people that are going to be able to provide accountability for your goals, that are going to help you develop these leadership skills, that are going to provide insider guidance and information, that's going to provide access to a broader network. I look at those as those professional mentors, as opposed to those other types of mentors, those psychosocial mentors. Sometimes I search them out. Like, for example, I still, coming to this area of Lehigh, never been here, as a Black person in this, Black man in this community, I look for those to guide me on a psychological, social level. What's it like? Where's the best places to eat? Where do I get my hair cut? You know,
Yeah.
these are those psychological social mentors that I search out as well within communities. And then finally, there's that role of mentorship that I like to try to assume once I establish a mentorship relationship with an individual. Once I decide to mentor someone and that person has decided to have me as a mentor, oftentimes that relationship, if it continues to grow in the informal way, then I often find myself serving more as a sponsor. And that is a
Mm-hmm.
person that is now helping to shepherd access
Mm-hmm.
into areas that this person is potentially interested in moving into. Might be upper management, it might be in just a whole different career field altogether. But when I think about mentorship, those are all the things that are on my mind.
No, I think you said something that's really important is, and what you're pointing out is that mentorship shows up in many forms. There are many ways in which we enter into relationship with people, and I think mentorship is a reflection of that. And so
Yeah.
I really appreciated, the different ways in which you define mentorship, especially that psycho emotional and social support.
Yeah.
And because I don't know if we think about mentorship in that way, and it is a form of mentorship, like that informal kind of like assurance, that informal like guidance. Sometimes that doesn't have to look like a friendship, that can mirror more of a mentorship kind of relationship. And I think the last part of you distinguishing the difference between mentorship and sponsorship, but even more so the transition that mentorship can become sponsorship. I don't know if we hear that conversation a lot, like the importance of sponsorship, but how mentorship can turn into that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, because sometimes it does turn into this relationship where I'm no longer guiding an individual. Actually, I might be in the room championing for
Yeah.
this person or advocating for this individual. And that individual is not necessarily present at that time.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean that's so critical when you're talking about access, which exactly what you mentioned is the importance of creating access, which is probably a whole nother different conversation.
Sure.
We can talk about sponsorship so deeply and how it's needed, especially when you think about it through an equity lens, if you think about it through a representation lens, if you think about it through a lot of things. And so I think it's important, but I think mentorship is a soft form of not necessarily breaking down barriers of access. Maybe in some ways it does,
Yeah.
but it is kind of like that first initial step of broadening someone's landscape, creating space for much more, or even just a space for acceptance and awareness. You also slightly mentioned ways in which folks can find mentors, which actually is a great transition to my next question
Yeah.
is, what advice would you give to someone seeking a mentor or someone who may want to make the most out of their current mentoring relationships? I don't think that folks often think about the ways in which you can maximize a mentorship relationship because there's no real training or conversation of how to be in a good mentoring relationship. So if you have any advice for folks, what would that be and look like?
Yeah. That's a good question. Advice. One advice for when you're searching for a mentor. Too many times when we think about mentorship, we just look in our specific chain of command. And I'll call it the
Mm-hmm.
chain of command just because of my military background. But we look in our chain of command exclusively for some sort of mentor there, and we expect that mentor somehow to produce themselves within that chain of command. But I always like to tell folks, look outside of that chain of command. Many of my mentors weren't necessarily individuals that worked within my particular unit. Sometimes there were mentors that didn't work within my organization, period. But these were people that were able to provide professional and technical guidance, and help me articulate my goals and set goals for myself. They proved to be invaluable. Also, I mentioned this before, is don't just think of mentorship from the perspective of that professional mentor. Don't be afraid to seek out another individual with a shared identity, to ask those questions that you would not necessarily ask of your professional mentor. Sometimes it's better to keep those two separate as well. I've had first generation students, for example, who feel more comfortable talking to someone that has come from a similar background, because they're afraid to ask that question that may appear dumb to the average person, and so that there's a reluctance or not understanding that it's just as important to go find that person that has some sort of shared identity, shared experience, shared background, that you can ask some of those social, psychological, emotional questions as well. Also, join professional organizations, find mentorship within professional organizations. I belong to the National Association of Mathematicians, which is an association of mathematicians of color, and I have found mentors there. I belong to the National Association of Diversity Officers in Higher Education, where I have found mentors there as a part of my role as a diversity practitioner in higher education. The other thing I always like to tell folks is that good mentorship can be transformative. I mean, it was a mentor that helped me realize that this role that I currently have, serving as as an executive in higher education, creating opportunities, opening doors, creating inclusive environments, that this was my passion and that I should pursue it. I still consider myself an academic. However, at that time, I was thinking very narrowly about my contributions in higher education and how I was going to contribute to the development of others in higher education, until I ran across a person named Ted Childs, who was, basically, he is one of the godfathers of diversity practitioners in the corporate space, who really founded a lot of this work when he was at IBM. And it was from him I learned how, I could contribute to higher education in a very different way, by creating access and opportunity for those who didn't have a seat at the table, whose voice wasn't being represented in certain decisions and policies as they were being made. So again, it was transformative. Mentorship can be transformative, professionally transformative. And then finally, I'd say within your organization, look to see if there's a formal mentorship structure or program and sign up for it. It is a great way to get your foot in the door, to meet others that are looking to mentor up and coming talent. Sometimes it can be often difficult, if you will, and also daunting to be new in an organization and then just trying to figure out where am I going to find a mentor. But oftentimes, many organizations do have formal mentorship structures. Sign up for them and get involved within your organizational mentorship programs.
I think you hit on quite a few things that I think are really important that I want to just call out for folks if they missed it. The first point is that mentors can help support articulating and setting goals, right? And I think that especially when you're thinking about folks who are students, right? Folks who are looking for, I guess it can show up in many ways. It could be personal, it could be professional, it could be connected to career, it can be connected to financial goals. But I think that's a really important thing when you have someone can help put language to what you're trying to accomplish. And having that person to be in conversation with, I think, is just important. And I think that the second piece of it, which really stuck out for me that I'm actually going to take personally, is advice is looking outside of your network or your realm of whatever that is, because I think there is a value in stepping outside of, let's just say, your box to identify and expand the ways in which you can be in relationship with folks, right? Like, I would not have thought about, as a marketer, as someone who's higher ed adjacent, thinking about, well, maybe it's worth me connecting to folks who are more deeply and actually like product, right? Like folks that I am somewhat adjacent to, but I'm like, your career path doesn't necessarily reflect mine, but that doesn't mean I don't get value out of it, right? Like,
Yeah.
so for me, that was really important. This piece around, which for me is like super, super important when we're talking about mentorship at its most basic level and form, is being in a relationship with people who have similar backgrounds, same experiences. I think about it from the student conversation. You said something in referencing like, feeling shame around asking questions, right? But like, I think about the importance of like those hallway conversations that often happen with peers, right? Like the informal things where you feel like I would feel comfortable, if I was in college and I'd be like, okay, so like, you're right, like where do I get a haircut? Who do I know in the neighborhood who knows how to do natural hair that's not going to burn my hair up? Like those things where you're recognizing this person may have had a similar experience. And so like that barrier, right, to the conversation doesn't exist. How you were saying, and that it actually just brought you closer to what you were passionate about and discovering that, and how like that mentorship relationship with Dr. Childs like helped usher that. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, absolutely important. Oftentimes, when you read about it, or when people talk about mentorship, you can hear this transactional
Yeah.
approach to mentorship. And so that's why I use the word transformative, because I really truly believe that good mentorship truly is transformative. Less about, I mean, it's transactional in some ways, but it's less about the transactional aspects of it. It's the transformational parts that prove to be long lasting and have the greatest impact.
Yeah. You hinted at this too. It's like when you're entering to a mentorship relationship, is you also have to identify what you want out of that.
Yeah.
Right. So that then you are in a place where it can become transformative. Well, this also is a good segue to my next question, because you started talking about how mentorship has shown up in your life with Dr. Childs, which is my next thing. This is the piece that I love hearing personally, because I like folks' narrative around the power of mentorship. And so, particularly for you, how has the power of mentorship shown up in your life?
Wow. That's a deep question there, because I really didn't fully appreciate the role and the power of having a mentor. I think it was around 1997 when I arrived at the U.S. Military Academy, West Point. At that time, I think I was probably a young major in the Army. And up to that point, I think there were those who had attempted to mentor me, but I didn't see the need for it at the time, or didn't appreciate the need for it. I thought all of my achievements needed to be acquired through some sort of God-given talent, and that's the way you succeed. No one ever really talked to me about mentorship or anything like that, or the relationship of having a mentor. But it was in but when I showed up at West Point, the U.S. Military Academy at West Point in 97, I was introduced to people there that an informal relationship formed with those individuals, and they saw something in me and decided to take the extra time to mentor me towards my full potential. And I don't think I would have gotten there without their intervention. And that's why I talk about this idea of mentorship being transformative. I remember Chris Arney as one of my first department heads, and Gary Cron, who succeeded him later. And I remember them, and I was in this at West Point. I was a young instructor there, who just came there to teach mathematics and then just go on and do other stuff. Hadn't had that plan figured out, but to do other stuff. But they stepped into my life, had a conversation with me about, you've got a talent and you have an identity that's underrepresented in our particular space. And you also have a personality that resonates with others.
Mm-hmm.
And we believe that you can make a contribution to mathematics in a number of different ways. And they're the ones who began talking to me about using my talent to go back, one, get a PhD, to deepen my understanding of the practice of mathematics, but then also encouraged me because they knew something about, they realized something about me. They encouraged me to use that to encourage and to attract others that looked like me, that came from communities that I came from, that had similar identities as me, to shepherd them into the field of mathematics. And through those conversations, through that mentorship, and they weren't direct with this, they were very subtle at the way that they guided and mentored me. But it was through their initial mentorship that really began to start connecting the pieces for me of developing the ideas that eventually formulated into the creation of the Center for Leadership and Diversity in STEM, where went off, got a PhD, came back, was empowered to lead others and to also help establish pathways for others to appreciate and participate in the discipline of the mathematical sciences. And that was Gary Cron and Chris Arney. Later, through them, I was introduced to other mentors, like the first African-American department head at West Point. He was the chair or the head of the electrical engineering computer science department there, General Andre Sales. Andre Sales he became a mentor to me because he began to be that psychosocial. He was one of the first psychosocial mentors I ran into, and began to start talking about, hey, Don, you're not doing these types of things, and you need to watch out for these types of things. And these are the things that you need to be focusing on. Telling me those things that from his experience as a Black person who was a uniformed officer, his experiences on if I wanted to remain and to continue to move up the ladder of success within the military. So people like that entered my life. And then moving on from there, like I said, as I was leading, found myself in the middle of leading diversity and inclusion efforts, unknowing to myself at the time, not realizing I was just doing what came natural and following my passions. That's when I was, came into contact with people like Ted Childs and other practitioners out there who began to mentor me about establishing best practices and strategies and helping to lead change. How do you lead organizational change? How do you go about that? That's a process that has to be shared and learned and imparted in order for you to be successful. So mentorship for me has really, again, I can't use another word other than been transformative, and it's been very important to success in my life, my career, and all that I've been able to accomplish.
And I do think it's important is that you had folks be able to shepherd you to be able to just realize your passion in a way that turned into a career where it turned from me just doing things to me establishing this as the career journey that I've decided to pursue. I don't know, that just kind of resonated with me deeply. I'm having like a moment of self-reflection as I'm talking out loud.
Alex, if I can add to that, no, I love you working through your stream of consciousness because I do the same thing. But as you were talking, I would be neglectful or remiss if I didn't mention the other part of this mentorship mentee relationship, and that's the part where sometimes the mentee becomes the mentor. I like your word relationship because it really is a relationship. And I think of a student I had, Michael Barlow. Michael
Mm,
Barlow was a cadet at West Point. You know, Michael's probably going to be a national leader at some point. So you remember
mhm,
that name. I'm going to say his name. But I remember serving as his mentor, having this mentor-mentee relationship with him. And then I remember the day when Michael became my mentor
mm,
because I was preparing to give a presentation, and we were thinking about the Confederate memorials and monuments that existed at West Point, and a discussion about whether we should remove those. And at the time, the Army was thinking about standing up a blue ribbon panel. And myself, a good friend of mine, and another former mentee, Ty Sidgley, who was the head of the history department at the time, and also
mm,
the author of the book Robert E. Lee and Me,
mm,
Southerners Reckoning with the Myth of the Lost Cause. I remember Ty introduced me to Michael, and I
mm,
began mentoring him. And as I was preparing for this blue ribbon panel and this discussion about why Confederate memorials and monuments should be removed, I was rehearsing it with Michael. And at the end, Michael said, "Well, you hit all the points, the salient points, but what
mm.
I didn't hear was passion. There was no passion there." And so
Mhm,
as I listened to you, while what you said was technically correct, it did not resonate with me. And
mm,
that was the big point, I'll say, when Michael began to mentor me. But I think had it not been for that strong mentor-mentee relationship that we had already formed, he would not have felt comfortable sharing that critique with me in such an honest
mm,
way. So you asked for advice to potential mentees searching for a mentor, but also, mentors. We need to
mhm,
realize that those individuals that we're mentoring for a reason. They have talent, they possess talent. And sometimes we have to stop and listen and
mm,
accept the role of mentee ourselves when we're with
mm.
those that we're mentoring.
I always say to be in relationship when I'm talking about mentorship because for me it is a reciprocal relationship, right? Like it is not just a one-sided power structure, but the idea is that because we're in a relationship, we both have something to offer. And I think that's also what you were saying is you created a space for him to feel psychologically safe
Yeah,
to
that's a
be
good
able
way to
to
put it.
share with you. Yeah. And I think that is such a critical component when we're talking about mentor-mentee relationships is the psychological safety. The question that I love to end with is, what makes you want to champion mentorship?
Hmm. Yeah, I think I more than touch. I think I shared it through my own personal journey. I mean,
Yeah.
because for me, I felt I was late to the game as far as understanding the importance of and the role of mentorship in one's professional development, but also personal development as well.
Mhm.
Um, and for that reason, um, I want to I want to ensure that others don't make that same mistake. Don't wait so late in life to seek out, not just seek out a mentor, but also recognize when a potential mentor-mentee relationship is evolving. Um, I missed out on those because, again, I didn't think about those things. No one ever told me about finding a mentor. I always believed that everyone pretty much got where they got in life, or achieved what they have achieved in life because of just, their talent and merit, and it was identified, and then they were rewarded or promoted or something like that. I did not recognize or fully appreciate and understand the true power of mentorship. And that's why I'm a fervent champion of mentorship, and also a person who is passionate about looking for opportunities to mentor others. Again, in a way that, one, establishing that initial relationship, and then hopefully, if that relationship flourishes, being able to become an advocate, a sponsor, to be that person that guides this individual on their prescribed journey to wherever they're trying to get to. And it's the joy I get from that satisfaction when it works out. When I think about people like Michael Barlow, when I think about those that I have had the privilege to serve as a mentor for, it fills me, it overwhelms me with such great joy that I can't help but want to be a champion for broader mentorship, not just within my own personal network, but encouraging others to mentor or to seek out a mentor.
That's powerful. It resonates deeply because I too didn't recognize, wasn't someone that leaned into having a mentor, which is actually the reason why I came to Mentor Collective. In grad school, I was pursuing to getting my degree in sustainable international development. And I literally changed, got my degree, graduated, all of these things. And then I changed my career trajectory because I distinctly remember not being in relationship with someone who looked like me, who had this similar experience as me in international development. And so you have to create opportunities for mentorship, because that cannot be the experiences of Black and brown kids. Like, we have to create opportunities for mentorship because it is so critical. It is so critical. And so I just appreciate that you said that there is a sense of deep urgency. There's a sense of deep importance and value for mentorship that really does shape a lot of our experiences. And so this has been a really good conversation. Here I am tearing up at the end, trying to hold my tears in. Just like, it's such a beautiful reminder of why, Mentor Collective does what it does, why we honor folks who are at the forefront of mentorship, and then hearing just the personal narratives just adds a deeper layer as to why you do the work that you do, why you champion it, why we are in partnership with you all at Lehigh in our mentorship programs there. And so thank you for being a part of the conversation.